She was just here. There is no explanation for it. We can't even make sense of it.
Police say Jadet Forman shot his wife, Gabrielle, and then shot himself. Police entered the apartment 5 hours later.
A woman comes home from celebrating her mother's birthday, gets on a video call to say goodnight, and within minutes, that call is cut off by the one person who should have made her feel safest. Hours later, she's dead. And the man who killed her had built the gun himself, piece by piece, ordered through the mail, completely untraceable. If you're new here, this is Crime Files, and if you want to understand exactly how a marriage went from wedding photos to a murder-suicide in under 2 years, hit subscribe, tap that bell, and stick with me, because this story is going to leave you with more questions and answers. Let's start with who Gabrielle Forman actually was, because before she became a headline, she was somebody's whole world. Everyone who knew her called her Gabby. She was 30 years old, living in Cohoes, New York, a small city just outside Albany, and she worked as a nurse. Not just any nurse either. She was in school working toward becoming a nurse practitioner. Her long-term goal was to open her own clinic one day. That tells you something about who she was. She wasn't someone who was coasting through life. She had a plan. She was building toward something. And by all accounts, she was already excellent at the job she had. People who worked with her said it plainly. Her father, Owen Sterling, later told reporters that her co-workers spoke so highly of her that some of them said they wished everyone in the building could be like her. That's not a small compliment. That's the kind of thing people say about someone who shows up, who cares, who makes the people around her better. Outside of work, Gabby loved to travel. Her godmother, Angelia Major, described her as someone who captured every single moment of her life, whether that meant going out for a nice dinner or flying Dubai and riding camels in the desert. She was, in her godmother's words, very photogenic, the kind of person who was always in the middle of some new adventure, always documenting it, always excited about where life was taking her next. And most importantly, right up until the very end, she was surrounded by family who loved her deeply. In fact, just hours before she died, Gabby had been in Georgia with her family. It wasn't a random trip. She was there to celebrate her mother's birthday and to see her sister off as she headed to college. Think about that for a second. This wasn't a woman isolated or cut off from the people who cared about her. She had just spent precious time with her mom and her sister, celebrating milestones, making memories, doing exactly what a loving daughter and sister does. Then she flew back home to Cohoes. And within hours of walking back to her own front door, her life would be over. It's worth pointing out just how ordinary that trip sounds, because that's what makes it so hard to process. This wasn't some final, symbolic goodbye. Gabby wasn't saying farewell to anyone. She was doing what any close-knit family does, showing up for her birthday, cheering her younger sister on as she headed off to start a new chapter in college. These are the kinds of moments families capture in photos and look back on for years. Nobody in that room in Georgia had any reason to think it would be one of the last times they'd all be together with Gabby alive. That's part of what makes this case sit so heavily with people who follow it. There's no warning sign in that Georgia trip. No red flag anyone could point to afterward and say, we should have known. It was just a family enjoying each other's company, the way families do. Now here's where the story gets complicated, because waiting for her at home was her husband, Jadet Forman, 37 years old. On paper, from the outside, this looked like a normal marriage. They'd been together for years, married in October 2024, living together in a second-floor apartment at a place called the Lofts at Harmony Mills. Neighbors never heard them fighting. Police had never once been called to that apartment for a domestic incident. Jadet had no criminal record in New York or anywhere else. To everyone around them, this was just another young couple working through life together. But behind closed doors, something had shifted, and that shift was about to turn deadly. Family friends later described the relationship as one that had gone through the normal ups and downs of marriage. A woman named Shay, who was close to the couple, told reporters that they'd had the regular kind of marriage issues, the kind most couples face, and that in the past they'd always worked through it and decided to stay together. But something had changed recently. Divorce had apparently come up as a topic before. According to Shay, but never to the degree it had reached in those final weeks. That's an important detail, because it tells us this wasn't a sudden, out-of-nowhere explosion. There was tension building. There was a marriage that was cracking under pressure. The people closest to them could sense, but maybe didn't fully understand the depth of. And a cousin of Gabby's later told a local station that Jadet could be an aggressive partner, though it's worth being clear that no one has described a documented history of violence. There were no police reports, no restraining orders, nothing on paper, just a feeling some family members had, one that, in hindsight, feels a lot heavier. It's worth pausing here to think about how often this happens. A relationship can look completely fine from the outside, no calls to police, no visible red flags, and still be quietly deteriorating in ways that only the people inside it can really feel. Gabby and Jadet had been together for years before things reached this point. They'd lived together since December of 2022, married in October of 2024. That's not a whirlwind romance that fell apart overnight. That's years of history, shared space, shared routines, presumably shared hopes for what their life together would look like. Whatever was happening behind that apartment door in those final weeks, it existed alongside all of that history, which makes it even harder to understand from the outside looking in. So, let's walk through what happened on that final day. It was Tuesday, August 18th, 2026. Gabby had just flown back from Georgia after that trip with her family. And once she got home, she did something completely normal. Something any daughter might do after a long trip. She got on a video call with her mother, just checking in, just saying hi, probably still riding the emotional high of the trip they just shared together. And then, according to a cousin who later spoke with a local news station, Jadet walked into the room. He took the phone from Gabby's hands, and he ended the call. Sit with that for a second, because if you're a mother watching your daughter on a screen, laughing, talking, present, and then suddenly the screen goes dark because someone else decided the conversation was over, that is terrifying. Police confirmed that no shots were fired during that call. Nothing violent happened on camera, but the abruptness of it, someone else taking control of Gabby's phone and shutting down her connection to her own mother, that's the kind of moment that sends a chill through you once you know what came next. Gabby's mother couldn't reach her after that. She tried, and she couldn't get through. And because she was still in Georgia, hundreds of miles away, there was nothing she could physically do. So she did the only thing she could. She called Gabby's brother, who lived closer, and she asked him to go check on his sister. He went, and when he arrived at the apartment complex, he called out for Jadet. That's when he heard 2 gunshots. He immediately called 911. Police say multiple 911 calls came in around 11 in the morning that Tuesday, all reporting the same thing. Shots fired inside that second-floor apartment. Officers arrived at the scene quickly. But here's where the story takes an agonizing turn because they didn't go in. Police Chief Todd Walden later explained that officers had only confirmed that shots had been fired inside the unit. After that initial burst of gunfire, they heard nothing. No screaming, no movement. No further shots, nothing that told them what they were walking into. So out of caution and following protocol for an unknown, potentially still active situation, they held back. They evacuated nearby apartments for everyone's safety. They called in backup from Colony Police, Troy Police, and the New York State Police. And then they waited for 5 hours. From 11 in the morning until around 4:30 in the afternoon, that apartment sat there, sealed off, while investigators worked to determine whether it was safe to go inside. Can you imagine being Gabby's family during that stretch of time? Not knowing, just waiting, hoping. Chief Walden said later that everyone who was on that floor or standing outside the building described hearing the exact same thing, a total of 2 shots, nothing more. And that consistency across multiple witnesses is part of what eventually helped investigators piece together the timeline. Mayor Bill Keeler addressed this delay directly in a later press conference, and he made an important point. He said that neither person inside that apartment ever called 911 themselves. Nobody inside made contact with police. The only calls came from neighbors and from Gabby's brother outside. And when the people involved in a situation aren't reaching out, and there's no way to know what's happening inside, there's genuinely very little law enforcement can do beyond wait and assess. When officers finally entered the apartment that afternoon, they found both Gabby and Jadet dead inside from gunshot wounds. The next day, Wednesday, August 19th, an autopsy was conducted, and it confirmed what investigators had suspected. Jadet Forman had shot and killed his wife, Gabby, and then turned the gun on himself. Cohoes' Mayor Bill Keeler called it, in his words, a clear-cut case. He told reporters plainly that both of them were already dead before police even received that first phone call. Chief Walden backed that up too, saying that given the nature of the gunshot wounds, there was nothing officers could have done differently. Even if they had gone in sooner, the outcome would have been exactly the same. That's a small mercy for the family in one sense, knowing that faster police action wouldn't have saved her. But it's also a devastating truth to sit with, because it means the moment her brother heard those 2 shots outside that door, it was already over. The 5 hours of waiting, as agonizing as they must have been for everyone involved, didn't change the outcome. Gabby was gone before anyone outside that apartment even knew something was wrong. Now here's where the case takes one more disturbing turn, and it's the detail that stuck with a lot of people following this story. The gun Jadet used wasn't purchased from a store. It wasn't registered. It didn't even have a serial number. Chief Walden described it as what's commonly known as a ghost gun, a 9mm handgun that Jadet had privately manufactured himself. Piece by piece, using parts ordered through the mail, Walden explained it plainly at the press conference. It was something that was put together. It wasn't a legal firearm, and Jadet wasn't even legally allowed to possess a firearm at the time. That last part is worth sitting with. He wasn't allowed to have a gun, and yet he built one anyway. From parts that arrived at his door, assembled by hand, completely invisible to any background check or gun registry system. Walden explained how these weapons come together. He said it can be manufactured by putting together parts that you order through the mail and combine yourself, creating a firearm that officially doesn't exist anywhere in any system. As of the most recent updates from investigators, it's still unclear exactly how he obtained the parts, or when he put the weapon together, or how long he'd had it in his possession before that Tuesday morning. Police have said the investigation into that part of the story is ongoing, and they've declined to comment further on where the components came from. It's a detail that raises uncomfortable questions about how easy it has become for someone, even someone legally barred from owning a firearm, to end up with a fully functional, untraceable gun in their home. No background check flagged it. No registration existed to track it. It simply appeared piece by piece in the mail, and ended up being used to end 2 lives in a matter of seconds. So where does that leave us? A 30-year-old nurse, someone with a career she loved and a future she was actively building toward, killed by her husband using a weapon that officially didn't exist. A family in Georgia who watched, quite literally, as their daughter's phone call was cut short by the man who would kill her within hours. A community in Cohoes left asking how a couple with no criminal record, no police calls, no documented history of violence, ended up here. Gabby's godmother, Angelia Major, put about as simply and as painfully as anyone could. She said, "We just can't believe she's gone. She was just here, just hours ago. She was just here. There is no explanation for it. We can't even make sense of it." And maybe that's the most honest place to leave this, because there isn't a tidy explanation. There's a marriage that friends say was going through problems, a divorce that reportedly hadn't fully happened yet, and a final, quiet, devastating decision made by one person that ended 2 lives at once. Gabby's brother told reporters that the family wasn't ready to speak publicly on her behalf beyond what little they'd already shared, which tells you just how raw and overwhelming this loss still is for them. It raises questions that go beyond just this one case. How many warning signs get missed because a couple looks fine on the outside, no police calls, no criminal record, nothing on paper? How do we as a society keep letting untraceable, homemade firearms end up in the hands of people who legally shouldn't have them in the first place? And when someone we love says things are fine, how do we know when they actually mean it? If this case affected you the way it affected me putting it together, let us know what you think happened in that apartment in the comments. And if you want more cases like this one, covered with the same care and respect for the people at the center of them, make sure you're subscribed here at Crime Files, because we're just getting started.